研究中心主任陈清寿教授上台致辞。恭请法藏法师、台湾宗教联合会创办人兼执行长上台致辞。恭请中华人权协会理事长高思博理事长上台致辞。
在座的法藏法师啊，还有我们高理事长，还有是这个比利时及意大利来的教授哦，还有我们各位学者专家，各位先进，大家好。那我们今天这个东吴大学法学院法律及宗教研究中心啊，举办这个第10回的法律与宗教研讨会。那也非常感谢我们协办单位中华人权协会、台湾宗教联合会呢，一起共同来主办这样一个活动哦。我想我们好不容易已经进入到第10回了哈。我们这一次研究的主题就环绕着宗教团体的一些制度面，如何来做一个革新，或者说呢检讨回顾过去有没有什么样的问题，展望未来应该如何来做一个规划啊设计，整个制度面呢以及实务面啊，做一种回顾检讨哈，展望未来。我们期盼我们的宗教法治呢更有合理化、现代化，更能够保障人权哦。那也非常感谢这个我们的学者专家以及各位先进的参与，来关心这样的一个重大的议题哦。我想宗教是一个很重要的一个人民的一个信仰哦，它引领我们人类走向光明的前途，让大家更有爱心哦，能够这个建构一个更和谐的社会啊，促进社会的一个良善发展的一个，可以说是一个光明灯了啊，或者是一种灯塔啊，引领我们前进啊。所以我觉得宗教呢这个议题是值得我们来关心啊。所以我们非常感谢各位先进的参与，我们庆祝大会圆满成功。本来今天上午是我们郑院长要来亲自主持，因为他临时有要工啊，必须要紧急处理，没有办法来这个会场哈，所以我也代表他呢跟大家表示一种歉意啊，谢谢大家，祝福大家，谢谢。我们请法藏师父来给我们支持，谢谢。
陈教授高理事长，还有我们在座诸位学者嘉宾诸位师父们很高兴再次的我们能够跟东吴大学合作台湾宗教联合会的顾名思义台湾那就是我们先用台湾的宗教为主要的考虑对象。那联合会的意思是指我们在讨论的这个会的成立宗旨呢，是要讨论所有宗教所共同会面临的我们说挑战也好，说问题也好。那么最大的挑战跟最大的问题呢 将是来自于呢，这个长期以来，我们华人的文化，是帝制的文化。帝制的文化呢，它跟这个人民的任何关系都是上跟下的关系。但就像陈教授刚刚讲的，但是人民的信仰关系呢，在一定程度上是他内在自我完成的重要的基础，这第一个。第二个，它也牵涉到了宇宙生成啊、国家意义啊等等，甚至于被牵涉到这个也在部分的宗教当中呢被论述。那么也就是我们就会看到了，当这个论述都会有重叠的时候呢，我们法律上最常讲的就是权利义务怎么样子的有界限。那么这个呢，在中华民国过去是还在戒严，然后在更早之前叫做训政宪政，在更早之前根本就是帝制。这2000多年、3000年来，儒家的文化提倡的是士大夫替国家服务，那国家呢配天行道，那这样就完成了一个稳定状态。我觉得这是过去有的，也没有什么可以批评的。但是迎向了所谓的资讯发达、知识普及，以及台湾基本是中等人民数量国家的民主化之后，每一个人民都在释放着他自己内在的思维跟能力的时候，那宗教作为导引每一个人内在思想的力量跟主要的依据，而国家越来越清楚于是集团，我说包括是政党集团的共同利益所代表的形象的时候，那我们就把国家的那种过高的神圣意义以及专制立场呢往下降到是人民的立场。那这个时候呢，国家跟宗教的关系就不能够再依着华人文化过去的国家管一切、国家笼罩一切、管理一切的思想再来讨论宗教的事情。可是事实是证明是，台湾才解严30多年，台湾人2000、3000年的这种文化其实还没有转变过来。我们的理论研究就是要引导、拜托我们诸位学有专长的人来一起跟宗教师们思考，这是一个可大可久可远，而且是华人历史第一次有这个机会，也有这个能力，也有这个地位去思考宗教跟国家之间的政教和平关系。过去的西方因为政教的分离是基于它的历史文化，可是华人政教一定要分离到互补关系，还是保持分离的本质，但是有互助的可能，这绝对是我们要思考。但是就在这个时候，西方引入了相当多的平等法则的时候呢，平等法是很人本，以人的思维为主的平等法。这种平等法当会一步一步的去侵蚀到宗教或者是礼俗本来存在的意义。比如说最近在谈的宗教，谈的平等法当中就提到了说，华人的礼俗当中有一些看起来男女不平等的，那是不是要改变？我觉得就宗教立场来说可以讨论，不是不能讨论。问题是不能讨论就说直接要改变吗？那如果是这样子，都开始就有人疑问了。礼俗很多来自于宗教，而宗教面对所谓的平等，人类自己思考出来的所谓平等的时候，是不是就毫无讨论余地，就要让步于平等法呢？那么国家在这方面的讨论应该扮演什么样子的角色呢？我们知道今天的国家的平等委员会很多是早年的人权团体来加入或者是参与的，那这些人权团体对于宗教的看法会不会足够平衡呢？那么中华民国有90%宣称有信仰，那么这些有信仰的沉默群众，他自己的信仰内在会不会在平等法的这么高的标准之好听的名义之下，一直让步于他基本上是宗教本质的界限呢？这真的很需要思考。我们有赖于学者专家运用诸位的智慧。那我作为一个宗教师，也就是促进这样子的讨论。好，以上再麻烦大家了，谢谢大家，谢谢大家。
这个陈清修学长，我们法藏法师，在场还有第一场我们主持人龚文祥教授，我们陈树董事长，还有2位远道而来，Dr. Introvin 跟这个 Mr. Voltaire 哈，2位远道到台湾来哈，还有在场很多位关心这个议题的这个好朋友哈，那也可能有很多同学、媒体的各位朋友，大家早安，大家好。中华人权协会非常荣幸哈，已经协办这个我们的法律与宗教研讨会哦，已经非常多届了哈。那我自己也出席过好几次哈。那我是非常高兴能够看到今天我们请到2位国外的学者哈。那我们以前的几次研讨，大部分都是围绕着台湾自己本土的法律与宗教的关系哦来开展哈。那今天我们这个研讨会可以说是有了比较多比较法的味道哈。那作为也是学法律的人啊，然后我现在在这个负责中华人权协会哈，我非常简单而且非常这个分享一下我觉得今天研讨会可能特别值得大家注意的事情啊。大家都知道说人权具有普适性啊，那我们中华人权协会也它致力于推展这个联合国体系底下好。所有现在这个承认的普世人权价值哈，那但是我们这个人权的理念哈，在一个社会落实的时候哈，它常常是遭遇到各种不同情况的这个阻碍，或者是各种不同情况的一些这个途径哈。那我觉得我们今天刚好可以借鉴一下这个一位来自意大利，一位来自比利时哦。事实上，尤其是这个欧洲国家哈，他们对于这个政治与宗教之间的关系哦，都有非常深厚的历史渊源哈。那这个部分非常值得我们借鉴好。那但是另外一方面，我们要知道比较法哈，我们通常都要找到自己本土的路径跟本土特别的一个这个障碍哈，然后克服好。那有很多也没有办法照搬好，所以我觉得今天这个研讨会有这一点哈，特别值得大家予以重视啊，就是我们可以从他们那边借鉴什么，那我们本土自己的问题或困境又是什么？那这个部分可能将来可以作为相关宗教法治一个非常好的一个这个立论的基础哈。那因为我自己在政府工作的时候，我参与过财团法人法相关的制定哈。那财团法人法里面本来要纳入宗教团体的管制，但是后来认为这个事情不适合放在财团法人法，所以后来就把它排除了哈。那所以现在我们宗教法治还是一个相对不是一个非常这个整全的状态哈。那所以这个部分也许将来我们有机会大家一起努力把它这个弄得更好一点哈。那台湾也可能会变成是一个这方面能够这个创造一个良好的宗教法治环境的一个国家好。那在这里希望大家今天都有所收获。然后本次的这个研讨会顺利成功，谢谢。
感谢3位老师精彩的致辞。那先请3位老师到台前，跟现在在场的所有老师到台前，我们来一张简单的大合照。
要用决心的啊，不是决心，不是要打架，是爱的心，爱你的决心。 还有吗？还有吗？这
然后我们再将这个爱心送给大家，好吗？对，
不会理的。
OK，谢谢。
啊，谢谢。
第一场研讨会正式开始，恭请东吴大学法律学系副系主任龚文祥副教授前来主持。
先用中文支持一下，讲话一下哈。这个今天很高兴能够受邀来主持第一场这个研讨会了。那这个感谢这个曾金秀老师，那当然也感谢法藏法师还有我们理事长高老师这个通力的一个合作。因为这场研讨会其实很盛大，那尤其是陈金秀老师是我的大学老师，我每次都要强调，所以老师交代我来主持，我就一定要来主持。虽然我早上本来应该在北市府有书院会了，那所以今天有幸来，当然也是可以来学习了。那也在还没有进入到英文致辞的英文开场前呢，我想也先跟各位说明一下，今天第一场有2个这个 keynote speakers， 就是待会两位学者，这是从这个意大利来跟比利时来的，其实大家可以去，甚至可以 Google 一下他们相关资料，其实来了台湾很多次。那对于台湾在这个宗教自由上面，其实也着力很深，甚至提出了一些这个司法改革的一个建言。所以今天真的是很荣幸能够邀请到这2位这个西方的学者、西方的专家。OK， 好，我现在可能要转到英文开场。OK， 好，Ladies and gentlemen, sincerely welcome all of you attending the conference today, held by the Center of the Law and the Religion in Suzhou University School of Law. For the very first section of today's conference, we have 2 keynote speakers, which means that our main host, Professor Qingxiu Chen, and also coordinator as well. For this meeting, Professor Chen take quite a serious attitude to make this kind of arrangement. As the chair of the first session, the job for the moderate, for myself, is to make sure we can finish in time. We can make sure we should finish this session in time. Therefore, for my colleagues in this panel, please be reminded because of the time limit. Each one only had 20 minutes for your presentation. So for our first topic, titled as the relationship between the politics and the religion. So 各位可以看那个手册，这我们第一个这个 topic 是这个政治与宗教关系啊。So Dr. Massimo Introvision, even though I 就在会前我有跟这个 Dr. Massimo 去请教这个 last name 要怎么pronounce 还是念不出来，所以 I'm so sorry for the pronunciation. Okay. So Dr. Massimo Introvision, I quote from the Wikipedia, is an entire Roman Catholic sociologist of the religion and the intellectual property attorney. He is a founder and the managing director of the Center for the Study in New Religions, which has been described as the highest profile lobbying and information group for the controversial religions. Dr. Massimo, one of the major names in the study of the new religion, has visited Taiwan several times and has been Taiwan's friend for a long time. So today, it's our honor to have Dr. Massimo intervene here. So Dr. Massimo intervene, I give the floor to you. So let us welcome Dr. Massimo.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Working. Okay. So So states have traditionally adopted different models for controlling religions, and they try to control some religion they label as cults. Now, scholars of religion in the West normally do not use the word cults because it's considered offensive and derogatory and not politically correct. So we do not use the word cults, we use the word new religious movements. Of course, that doesn't mean that all new religious movements are nice and bring peace, love and flowers. So we also use criminal religious movements for movements committing crimes, but the word cults is very ambiguous and only creates confusion. Notwithstanding this attitude prevailing in the academia, there are private lobbies that conduct campaigns and try to persuade the state to fight groups labeled as cults, and also some states have anti-cult policies for reasons of their own. We are in a very interesting period of time to discuss this topic because of the war in Ukraine. Most anti-cult private organizations in Europe and indeed in the world are under an umbrella organization called FECRIS, and headquartered in France and funded by the French government. The gentleman you say in the right has been for many years vice president of FECRIS and is still a member of the board. It's a Russian Orthodox theologian called Alexander Dvorkin. The problem is the anti-cultists in Russia have emerged as very vocal supporters of Russia in the war of aggression against Ukraine, and indeed they supported the anti-Ukrainian position of Putin before and contributed the argument that is false, but it's propaganda of course, that Ukraine is a country whose culture and governments are dominated by the cults. So because of this situation, all of a sudden the names of the Russian affiliates disappeared from the FECRIS website between March 31st and April 5, 2022, but that doesn't mean that the contacts between FECRIS and Russia have been terminated, and to make the situation worse, several scholars have investigated not only the connection of FECRIS with Russia, but also the connections of FECRIS with mainland China, where Western anti-cultists have visited often and supported the Chinese repression of Falun Gong and other new religious movements. So here you see a dinner of FECRIS with anti-cultists from different parts of the world in Paris. And the topic of my paper, I'm a sociologist, is how anti-cultism as the ideology, falsely from the point of view of academic studying religion, differentiating between religions and cults, follows different models in different countries, but that doesn't mean that on some issues they cannot cooperate or share nice dinners together. In 1993, that shows I'm old enough, I introduced the distinction between a counter-cult and an anti-cult movement. The counter-cult movement has existed for 2,000 years, and it's the attitude, particularly by Christians, but also by Muslims and Jews, and perhaps other religions, to label as heresies the groups which are regarded as not orthodox. And that, of course, is part of religion, since religion exists. But in the late 20th century, something new appeared, and that's the anti-cult as opposed to the counter-cult movement. And the anti-cult movement claims to be secular and to use secular arguments against the so-called cult. So, different models. The first and the oldest model is the American model. Of course, in the United States, there was a robust Christian counter-cult movement, but normally didn't ask the state or the courts to do anything. They were happy to deliver sermons or publish books against the heretics. But in the late 1960s, what happened together with the hippie revolution in the United States is a number of college students decided to drop out of the college and to work as full-time missionaries for the Korean Unification Church, or become monks and nuns for the Indian Hare Krishna movement, or to join other groups. So of course the parents were not happy, and they didn't find that the theological criticism by the counter-cult Christian movement was enough. So they found a convenient explanation of why their children joined such strange groups in the theory of brainwashing. Now, brainwashing was a political concept. The name had been coined by the CIA, the American intelligence, in its propaganda operation against China during the Cold War. But some anti-cult psychologists, including Margaret Singer, you see here, took this concept from politics and applied it to religion, saying there is a distinction between religion. Religion tries to persuade you with rational arguments, while cults use this mysterious technique of brainwashing to compel you to convert. Now, if you are brainwashed, you cannot be rationally persuaded to go back to your old ways, but you should be counter-brainwashed. And so a gentleman who is still alive, but 90-year-old, Ted Patrick, who was a bureaucrat for the state of California, he was not a scholar or a psychologist, invented something called deprogramming, meaning people were adult members of new religions were kidnapped in the streets and detained in secluded places and bombarded with negative information about the cults until they were deconverted. As the study of late sociologist Andy Shoup demonstrated, cooperating with deprogrammers was a structural feature of the American anti-cult movements, but deprogramming and a number of problems. For instance, there were cases of deprogrammers raping the female members of cults they were trying to deprogram, and so American courts in the 1990s made deprogramming illegal. Now, sociologically and conceptually, it is unclear why the anti-cultists say brainwashing is bad but deprogramming is good, because it seems it's the same strategy in their mind. Of course, scholars do not believe brainwashing exists at all, But the difference, according to the anti-cultists, was not in the method, but in the aim. Because brainwashing leads you to make a wrong choice, and deprogramming leads you to what they believe it's a good choice. And that leads us to different idea of freedom. The American model of anti-cultist, which is a private model because the state never endorsed it. There are no anti-cult laws or governmental institution in the United States. On the contrary, the state often defends new religious movements when they are persecuted abroad. So it's a private model, and it's based on an individualistic late 20th or 21st century ideas of freedom, meaning you are only free if you keep your autonomy. If you give a part of your autonomy to a religion, you surrender a part of your freedom voluntarily. Yours is not a genuine choice, it's a bounded choice, as they say, and you have been brainwashed. So you can believe you are happy and free, but the anti-cultists know better than you, and so they can rescue you by violence if needed and make you free again. So that's the American model, which is a private model. The state does not intervene, but it relies on private association and the media. Now for something completely different, we have the Chinese model. China developed since the 7th century CE the expression "se jiao," and we know exactly who coined the expression "se jiao." It was a Tang Taoist courtier called Fu Yi, and he was against Buddhism, and he used this expression against Buddhism. And Se Jiao, which were later punished with the death penalty, means heterodox movements who oppose the emperor and use black magic to convert their followers. So today Se Jiao is translated as evil cults, but that's an anachronistic translation. And I have discussed in conference with Chinese Marxist scholars, and later they published a declaration which mentions conversations with me, and now their proposal is we do not translate Se Jiao, as we do not translate Qigong or Kung Fu. We should simply say Se Jiao, let's not translate it. And black magic, of course, as one of the features of Se Jiao, now has been replaced by brainwashing, which, as a Chinese scholar Wu Yongqing has suggested, is just a modern version of black magic. And that's surprising because brainwashing, as I told you, was a word coined by the American intelligence to slander China in the 1950s. Brainwashing was something the bad Chinese were doing. But now brainwashing is used in China to attack the Se Jiao. In China today there is an article of the Chinese Criminal Code, Article 300, making being active in a Se Jiao crime. But there is a long tradition in China of criminalizing the Se Jiao. The more complete law are in the Ming Dynasty, and then they continue. Se Jiao were criminalized in communist China and in Taiwan during the martial law period, and there are some remnants of it, for instance, in the attitude of the National Taxation Bureau in Taiwan, as proved by the Taijimen case some of you may be familiar with. So the Chinese system does not protect, like the American system protects a certain idea of freedom of the individual, which is an ideological idea. The Chinese system protects the state against groups accused of not supporting it. Now, a third and also different model is the Russian model. And of course, these models interact. I mentioned Alexander Dworkin, and here is Alexander Dworkin, the chief Russian anti-cultist, lecturing in China, so these people cooperating with each other. In Russian, the bad word for cult is secta, but it's sect in French, or sect in Italian, so it should be translated as cult, not as sect, because in English sect is not such a bad word. So the bad word is cult in English and is sect in French or secta in Russian. So in Russia, there are laws which allows for what they call totalitarian cults, so be liquidated as extremist organization. And based on these laws, for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses have been liquidated, and now being a Jehovah's Witnesses make you land in jail in Russia. And the category of extremism in Russia was introduced after 9/11. So everybody agreed, even foreigners say, of course they should protect themselves from Islamic terrorism. But then this law was expanded 2 times, and now it is regarded as extremism to argue that your worldview is superior to others, which of course is something all religious do. It doesn't apply to the Eastern Orthodox Church, to the Russian Orthodox Church, but if you argue that your religion is better than the Russian Orthodox Church, you are an extremist, even if, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, you are totally peaceful and not violent. And the other tool used in Russia is the so-called Yarovaya law. Here you see Irina Yarovaya, who is now the Speaker of the Duma, complimented by Putin after her law was passed. And the Yarovaya law is a law against proselytization, meaning you cannot try to convert a Russian citizen who is a member of the Russian Orthodox Church or in some geographical area of the other traditional religion like Islam in Chechnya or Buddhism in Kalmykia to another religion. But if you are the Russian Orthodox Church, you may try to convert a Catholic or a Buddhist to Orthodoxy. That is allowed. But what is not allowed is convert a Russian Orthodox to a different religion. So what does the Russian model protect? It protects the Russian Orthodox Church, which has a symbiotic relation and a deal with the Putin regime. The Putin regime protects the Russian Orthodox Church against competition. The Russian Orthodox Church organizes the consensus for the Putin regime. Finally, in conclusion, there is a different model, and that's the French model. France, since the French Revolution, has a very specific notion called laïcité, and English-speaking scholars have struggled how to translate it, and decided secularism, secularity, nothing is good. So again, it should be left in French, laïcité. And laïcité, as Dutch scholar Wouter Hanegraaff, whose birthday is today, I discovered, has demonstrated, is the idea that irrationalism is something against the values of the French Revolution and the République, is very bad, and you can be irrational in your own home, but if you organize irrationalism in a public forum, the state should repress you. And I skip for the sake of brevity, but French anti-cultists really believe all religions are potentially cults, only for strategic reasons we cannot find all of them. So the difference of the French model is it does not rely, like in Russia, on the Orthodox Church. It does not rely, like in United States, on private deprogramming, but it relies on the government itself. There is an anti-cult governmental agency called Mivilude, which is fighting cultic deviances. And now, in France, the new name of the game is separatism. There is a new law against separatism or separatism. And what is separatism? To organize separate communities with different values from the majorities, and this is used against Islam, but also against the so-called cults. So here you see my summary, 4 different models. They do not protect the same thing, but they cooperate between themselves. So my distinction is not rigid, and we could add other models. In Israel, for instance, there is a strange cooperation between atheists and ultra-religious Jews against conversion. In Japan, after the Abe assassination, there is a variation of the Chinese model, and so on. But I maintain that there are differences, and my 4 models might help understand what is going on in the world anti-cult community, including after the war in Ukraine and after the new threats of China against Taiwan. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Massimo Introvenge, for your excellent talk and quite interesting. I think especially for its depth and the breadth in your topic. I think it's true. I think it is quite an important issue, and it should be the prerequisite issue we need to answer to. How to define religion, especially from the secular perspective. So it's very exciting to have your speech, and we can learn from different perspectives to understand how to protect religion before we understand what the religion is. OK， 谢谢这个 Dr. Massimo。那其实我想说这样的安排其实正好，因为以我作为下午的报告人，然后我们在写题目的时候，我们大家其实一开始会有意无意的会回避到底宗教是什么，然后就直接进入到宗教自由的一个讨论。所以今天第一场这样的一个这个演讲，真的是我想说虽然是个主持人，但其实学习到很多。OK， 好，这当然有点多言了，有点多言，应该我时间有限，不过还是要回应一下刚刚那个法师在一开始有提到的宗教法律跟宗教之间的关系哦。我以前在做学生的时候，我的指导老师陈真正大法官，他其实有跟我们说过，如果你要学这个国家的法律，其实你可能连他的宗教法都必须要学。那也因为说我就没有去德国了，因为老师是留德的，他认为说你要学，当然因为在场有很多法律的先进哦。那当然是有点超次，不过就因为当初陈老师是有这样特别去提到，就是说如果你要学会真的掌握到德国法，那可能德国的那个宗教法其实是必须要去学习的。OK， 好，一样我这次多言了。OK，now we have our second speakers, Mr. Willie Fortress. His topic is the issue to the religion group autonomy. 所以他的报告题目是宗教团体的自治问题。Mr. Willie Fortress.The founder of the Human Rights Without Frontiers in Brussels, from Belgium. I have been to once for the conference. 我曾经去过一次，我在那个布鲁塞尔很漂亮的一个城市。It's also Professor Willie is also Taiwan's very close friend. He has devoted his life working with many international NGOs for the international human rights, and even proposed some suggestion for the judicial reform in Taiwan.So it's our privilege to have Ms. Willie today. So I have the floor to you. So let's welcome Mr. Willie Fortress.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very. Okay. Thank you very much for your invitation and for being so numerous to attend this seminar. So the title of my presentation is Autonomy of Religious or Belief. belief organizations and state neutrality in Europe. The constitutional and legal framework defining the status and the place of religious or belief communities in the state is of utmost importance to guarantee political and social stability and domestic peace in any country. The state neutrality and the right to self-management by religious communities are two essential pillars of our democracies in Europe. The autonomy of religious, spiritual and non-theistic groups, whether they are a majority or a minority in a country, can, however, not be addressed separately from other issues related to freedom of religion or belief. The intersectionality with other elements is essential to correctly assess their level of effective independence from the state and the degree of social inclusiveness allowed by the state. States may have many different practices regarding the various degrees of autonomy that they grant to religious or belief groups. These range from situations where the state and religious or belief communities are strictly separated to other situations where you will find a wide array of interactive relations models. In France, it was already mentioned, but briefly, the law on separation, not separatism, but the law on the separation of churches and state in 1905 guaranteed the non-interference of the state in the internal affairs of religion, but also protected the state from any interference of the dominant religion, Catholicism, in its own affairs. So freedom from religion is also related to the autonomy principle. In the Netherlands, there is also autonomy between state and religions, but the clergy was paid by the state despite the autonomy. And in the 1980s, the state decided to make an agreement with religious organizations by which it was decided that the state would put an end to the financing of the clergy and the property of the churches. So autonomy does not only mean more freedom for religious groups, but it also means more responsibility for them. In Belgium, my country, there is also autonomy between the area of the state activities and religions activities. The Constitution guarantees the mutual autonomy, as I said, of the state and the recognized religions, and I insist on recognized religions. But this does not forbid the state institutions to finance the maintenance of their buildings, religious buildings, their clergy, their worship activities, their faith-based schools, hospitals, etc. Autonomy is an essential component of freedom of religion or belief, but equal treatment of religious or belief entities by the state, excluding any form of discrimination, is another important and complementary element. Autonomy without equality between religions is meaningless. If members of religious minorities are discriminated against and socially treated as second-rank citizens. I will now explore the intersectionality between autonomy and the state's treatment of religious and belief communities. In the relation between state and religions in Europe, various forms of systemic discrimination go on persisting to various degrees, whatever the political system. in many EU countries, there are tier systems of classifications of religions used and misused by the state to justify a different, as they say, but discriminatory treatment of the various categories of believers. Most European democracies have legislations that create a hierarchy of religions and grant them or deny them a number of rights and financial advantages according to their classification. This discriminatory categorization usually starts with the type of legal status to which religious or belief communities are allowed or denied to have access to on the basis of questionable criteria. This is the case for many EU member states, which have inherited from their history, from their past, a system of relations between state and religion, or king or emperor and religion, that privileges a specific church or a limited group of religious communities to the detriment of others. This is the case, and I will list a number, and it's not an exhaustive list of countries. Austria, Belgium, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, and other countries. I could illustrate this point in quite a number of countries where you have several categories of religion. Sometimes it's just 2 categories, as in Belgium, but sometimes there are 3 categories and sometimes even 4 categories of religion. So Belgium, a 2-tier system is in force for religious and belief communities. Tier 1, state-recognized religions and belief communities. You will notice that I usually use religious and belief communities as there are groups that are on the, let's say, on the limit, on the verge of what is religious and non-religious and can be non-theistic. So, state-recognized religions and belief communities are in Belgium Catholicism, Protestantism, Anglicanism, Judaism, Islam, Orthodoxy, Buddhism, and secular humanism. Tier 2, all the other communities, and then their status. They are not recognized religions, but they are just non-profit associations like a football club or any other social association, and they don't have tax exemptions. In hierarchy systems like the Belgian one, religious and belief communities that are not state-sanctioned, state-recognized, and not in the top categories are denied certain rights and opportunities, including their clerics and their members. In Belgium, for example, Tier 2 face, like Jehovah's Witnesses or Hare Krishna devotees, are not eligible to get tax exemption and to receive state subsidies for wages, pensions, lodgings of their clergy, while it is the case for those that are recognized by the state, so the religions that I have just listed. They are not, so talking about Jehovah's Witnesses and Hare Krishna and others, the Church of Unification Church or any other, they are not permitted to teach religion in public schools, because in Belgium there are provisions in the constitutions that say religion must be taught in public schools, but only recognized religions. So those that are not recognized, they cannot teach their own religion, but their own young people have to follow one of those religions that they are not a member of. Just another example of discrimination. So, Tier 2, second lower category of religions, they are not allowed, for example, to invite foreign missionaries or preachers as volunteers in Belgium if they don't have a work permit. So work permit is needed for volunteers coming from Africa and even America. There were cases of American Mormons that were denied entry in Belgium as volunteers for their church. It was not a very general practice, but such cases happened. So, Tier 2, lower level religions are not entitled to have officially accredited chaplains. Chaplains in prisons, chaplains in retention centers for asylum seekers, in hospitals, in armed forces, in homes for elderly or handicapped people. And I remember a case of discrimination of someone from India, so Indian Hindu religion, that was discriminated against concerning his food, concerning the visit of a chaplain, because the status of chaplain, Hindu chaplain, didn't exist in prison. And they are also denied, so the second-rank religions, equal opportunities to have access to public media. TV and radio, public TV and radio in Belgium give some time to recognize religions, to expose or to use half an hour or an hour per week their antenna to talk about their activities, not the other religions. And final point that joins what in a different way Massimo Introvinier raised before, those second-rank religions are stigmatized at times as so-called harmful cults. That's the official term in Belgium, and warned against by state-funded institutions put in place to monitor and, I would say, to control them. And consequently, members of such organizations have been reported to be discriminated against at school by courts in child custody cases. Oh, you're a member of a harmful cult. No, your children we will give to the other partner who is not a member of a cult. But also for access to Belgian nationality, for positions in civil servants in municipalities, for example. So in other European countries, the discrimination list between the various categories of religions would follow a similar pattern as in Belgium. These examples show that autonomy does not mean equality of treatment of all religious or belief groups, and does not mean neutrality of the state. I will now address quite a number of other issues that are increasingly emerging in the European Union. It's the conflict between autonomy of churches and exemptions from general laws that are really questioned now. So this next this area of intersectionality, I will explore, so confirms such conflict situations between general laws of the state and specific practices in the way of life of minority religions and their members. Of the many issues that are likely to raise questions, some of the most frequent are conscientious objection to military service. The clear trend in most democratic states is to allow those with serious moral or religious objections to military service to perform an alternative non-military service. However, state laws should not be unduly punitive for those who cannot serve in the military for reasons of conscience. Gradually, that problem has been solved in the EU countries. But in the 1990s, I was very active about the situation in Greece, where non-Orthodox and Jehovah's, of course, Witnesses in particular, but also some Protestant believers, were put in jail for 4 years because they were refusing military service. And they were put in jail with real criminals from the army. We finally managed to solve this problem, and we were our organization was an important actor on this issue. Religious attire, another area of conflict between state general laws and specific activities of religious groups. With the immigration in the last decades, European countries have become more and more multicultural and multi-religious. Wearing the veil or the scarf in state institutions, at school, in courtrooms, the chador in the public space, religious symbols in state administrations have been new societal challenges open to public debates and legal developments to try to conciliate the neutrality of the state and the autonomy of religious or belief groups and their members. Food. There are several foods that are prohibited by many religions and ethical traditions, including meat such as pork or meat that must be prepared in accordance with ritual practices. In the spirit of promoting tolerance and inclusiveness, an increasing number of states encourage institutions providing food, particularly in schools, hospitals, prisons, military, to offer optional meals for those with religious or moral requirements. Days of religious activities. The two types of days that raise questions of exemptions are, first, days of the week that have religious significance, Friday prayers, Saturday and Sunday worship, for example, and second, calendar days of religious significance such as Christmas, Yom Kippur, Ramadan. To the extent possible, more and more states in Europe, more and more state laws accommodate or try to accommodate such practices. Medicine, and that will be almost the last of the series. Some religious or belief communities reject one or more aspects of medical procedures that are commonly performed, such as blood transfusions. In this regard, Jehovah's Witnesses have taken the initiative to make agreements with a wide range of doctors and hospitals to privilege alternative procedures to blood transfusions. While many states allow adults to make their own decisions concerning the right to choose their medical treatment, laws can also allow hospitals to legally make blood transfusions on minors despite parental wishes. So you will not find any case in the European Union of children who died because of lack of blood transfusion. And then really a new emerging issue, ritual slaughter. In December 2020, the EU Court of Justice, which is different from the EU Court of Human Rights. The EU Court of Human Rights covers 47 member states in Europe. The EU Court of Justice covers the member states, 47 for the Council of Europe, and the EU Court of Justice covers the 27 member states of the European Union, and when a decision is taken in one country, it is valid for all countries. So, ritual slaughter. December 2020, the EU Court of Justice in Luxembourg, and not in Strasbourg, ruled in a final decision in favor of a Flemish ban, I would say Belgian ban, but we are a federal state, in favor of Flemish ban on ritual slaughter without stunning, in conformity with an EU regulation on the protection of animals at the time of killing. So we now have a conflict between animal rights and religious rights here. The Jewish and Muslim organizations in Belgium had previously filed a common appeal to the court to overrule the ban in the name of freedom of religion after the Advocate General of the court had recognized that banning is an attack on the rights of Belgian citizens to practice their religions freely and is incompatible with EU law. in September 2 years ago, the Belgian Constitutional Court supported the judgment of the European Court of Justice that Muslim and Jewish institutions go on discussing with the Belgian authorities about the implementation of the ruling. And in conclusion, just a few lines. The autonomy of religious or belief communities and some aspects of the way of life of their members in a democratic context is a wide-ranging and complex and more complex issue, I would say. It is intrinsically linked to the neutrality and the political will of the state to build an inclusive society in which religious and belief groups are respectfully treated on an equal footing. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thanks, Mr. Willie Crocker. So even though right now it's out of time, I would like to add some information for you. For Mr. Willie's conclusion, he mentioned about the reasonable alternative. So 你们可以各位可以看那个手册，在他的结论里面，他mentioned about the reasonable alternative. Because from the perspective of United States, 这个我们理事长在这边理事长也是公法这个美国法的一个专家。Okay, if freedom of the religion, only have the equal protection and neutrality. Actually, some scholar and even the Supreme Court justice have said that you will have nothing left without religion of freedom of religion. So, 也就是说，如果宗教自由只剩下这个所谓的平等保护跟所谓的中立性原则，那它其实到后来，其实这个宗教自由内涵会被掏空，因为世俗的法律我只要平等对待就好了。所以so from the perspective of the United States, we would like to add some accommodation, the principle of accommodation. 这个中文我不太确定要怎么翻，就是容忍或是宽容。它有点是就类似这个刚刚那个这个围绕那个 Mr. Willie 所提到的这个所谓的 reasonable alternative. OK， 所以占用大家时间，我想说只是想说可以做一点呼应了。OK, today we have two keynote speakers. Each one has his own significant thought regarding the freedom of the religion by using many examples from many different countries. So let's present our many thanks to Dr. Massimo and Mr. Willie again. So 我们再次谢谢两位这个讲者。So I need to apologize because we cannot finish in time. So all for demand. So okay, so my bad. OK， 所以我们今天的这一场就到这边结束。那谢谢大家的一个参与。OK， 谢谢。
现在拍照，拍一张。
现在中场休息，我们先断播一下。